Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchins.
Folks, we'll get into the whole story in a little bit, but I just want to get Jason's 2 cents worth in it.
Yeah, he went 245 and 4/8 gross and 234 net, and obviously that's not official. Can't be officially scored until I believe November 30th, if I'm not mistaken. And smaller property, wasn't exactly sure how I was going to set up, depending on wind direction and everything like that. So hung the set the week before, and then waited for a north wind. Needed a north or a west northwest for that spot, and the wind ended up switching Tuesday afternoon out of the north. So made a move and just lucked out.
Well, it's just amazing what I'm seeing so far on social media. A lot of people are taking does. A lot of people are taking, their first deer, and guys like you are just putting a hammer down and taking, a world-class mature buck. And that's what we'll be talking about on the show. And folks, this is just a primer. Jason Passmore. He's from Kansas, and he just put down a huge buck. Did you score it yet?
Yeah, he went 245 and 4/8 gross and 234 net, and obviously that's not official. Can't be officially scored until I believe November 30th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the 60-day drying period.
Yep. So somewhere in that ballpark. And he'll, like I said, green score, he's 245 and some change, and he netted 234 even for the initial score. So we'll find out after 60 days where he's at. And then, it doesn't matter. Mature deer like that, it's all icing on the cake. Realistically, I never planned to break the 200 mark, let alone a deer of that caliber. But it's a great feeling either way. So we're, my wife and I were just happy that we could get our hands on him.
Oh, yeah. And folks, we'll get into the whole story in a little bit. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, early season success special with Jason Passmore from Emporia, Kansas. And Jason did something that we all dream about, and taking a 200-inch DIY buck. His grossed out at 245. This is an early season buck. It just happened. So, Jason, welcome to the show, and I can't wait to hear the story, man. You're up. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Bruce. Well, it's a deer that we named Gannon. We passed him last year on a property that my wife and I hunt. It's been our family for a number of years, and he was probably in the low to mid 150s last year, and we elected not to hunt the property after I'd seen him the first time because I didn't know if I'd be able to pass him again. Just pretty tempting. He had a few non-typical points and a pretty heavy deer. Obviously, by letting him walk, I thought he'd get bigger, but I didn't think it'd be to the extent that he did. And he showed back up this spring. We found a shed this early spring. One of my buddies that I shed hunt with found his left side, and then he showed back up, obviously in velvet. And I've got a pile of pictures of him in velvet, and tried to get an early season pattern on him, and he actually disappeared for a couple weeks. Not sure why. Probably when he was losing velvet. Showed back up September 3rd, and his velvet was gone, and he was back onto a somewhat normal routine, obviously mostly at night, being a mature deer. But starting Friday, I guess, maybe the 21st or 20th, whatever that was, I had him daylight Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then I killed him Tuesday evening at 6:45, and we have a pretty fair amount of history with this deer, and it's actually the first deer I've ever taken off this particular property, um, and only the first shooter that I've had since 2015 in there, and obviously not killing one in there before is a pretty big deal. But it really went to show, if you give him time, they can sure put it on. And he blew up. He, depending on what he ends up scoring, he put on between 80 and 90 inches from last year to this year. So, um, pretty big deal.
That's huge. I mean, folks, just think about it. How much bone that is to grow in just, one, matter of months.
Yeah, it's huge. And like I said, I could forward you some velvet pics and stuff like that. So
yeah, I'd love to have them when we post your blog.
Sure. And it's not what you expect when you let a deer walk. Obviously, the whole idea is to let them grow a little bit, but something like that was definitely not expected. But obviously, I'm more than happy with the outcome of it. It was pretty unreal to watch, and for us to be able to take in firsthand.
Now, you said you never had taken a deer off this property. How long have you owned the property or had access to the property?
Well, my grandparents owned it or still own it. And I can't tell you when they purchased this ground, but it's been in their family for, generations. So, and it's not a big piece of property or anything like that. It's just a small 160 acre piece. And it's not overly advantageous to hunt. It's pretty tough to hunt unless the winds are exactly perfect, which is what I had to wait for. Um, and a lot of people say, "Oh, well, north wind's pretty easy to get," and which it is late in the season. But I wanted to try to target a buck early, and we don't get a lot of north winds right now in Kansas when it's still this warm out. And we caught that cold front just right, and it just simply worked out when he was daylighting a little bit and caught the north wind on Tuesday and made him show up roughly an hour before dark. So uh, I really think that was just why he was on his feet moving a little bit earlier, because it was a 15-degree temperature drop that day, and the wind went from southwest straight out of the north, blowing pretty hard. So that's just what I keyed on and went in after that.
Folks, you just got a tremendous amount of intel by what Jason just said in the last couple of minutes. Just to break it down, one small 160 acres is huge. How much is woodlot or huntable versus ag?
There's probably 100 acres of tillable, and the rest being, creek bottom and woodlot. So it's broken up into 4 different fields, and I just hunt the creek crossing is where I hung that set. And I really felt like the only way to kill him in that small of, property, there's a pretty fair amount of pressure around it. So before, even though he got hard horned, he was still on a pattern, and he actually hit 2 scrapes on the way to me. So they're starting to get a little bit amped up. Obviously, we're in October now, so they were on their way to getting amped up. And then I really think that he would have left the property just because it doesn't hold a whole lot of does. So I think when the rut would have kicked in, I think he would have been gone. So I felt my best opportunity to shoot him was early and just caught him on that pattern. And I really didn't think he'd daylight for 5 days in a row, but I just lucked out and caught that cold front just right while he was, on his feet for that darn near a week. And it just got him moving a little earlier with that north wind, and it helped out.
If a cold front's coming through, you're going to get plenty of warning. Call in sick. Don't show up for work. Get a kitchen pass. but you need to hunt that, and just cold fronts, they just work. Why? You get barometric pressure change, you get a delta in the temperature. Typically, cold front, the wind switches up, everything changes, and so it modifies behavior. Your thoughts on that?
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly right. Just my opinion. Obviously, I don't claim to know everything about deer hunting or anything like that, but I saw 2 deer that night, and both were mature bucks, and um, I was after Gannon without a doubt. So the other buck got a pass, but both of them hit scrapes. They were on their feet early. Um, Even though I would say they were still patternable because of early season, I think they were, they're gearing up, getting ready for rut, stuff like that. But um, yeah, I don't know about calling in on most days, but if you get a 15-degree temperature change, uh, and you think you got a shooter daylighting, and probably better make a move. I was actually in the middle of helping one of my buddies pour concrete, and at 2 o'clock when that cold front hit, I told him he had enough help, and I was headed to the tree. So it worked out. He ended up getting his concrete done, and I ended up getting a deer. So it worked out in the end.
Let's talk about the set now. In the pictures you sent me, you could tell them that close to a creek bound, or there was elevation changes. But is that a funnel, a pinch point, or do you set it up because that's where the tracks are? That's where the trail was.
Well, there's obviously pretty heavy trails that go through there, but there's, like I said, it's broke up into 4 fields, and the creek runs right through. Basically, there's fields on the north side, 2 fields on the north side, with an old railroad bed that runs northwest to southeast through it, and then there's a creek crossing where the old bridge used to be, and they just hammer that creek crossing that's just about right in the middle of the property, that all the fields connect at the same point right there. So basically, if you set up, on that pinch point where all those fields meet, it funnels everything down to one focal point, and uh, eventually, something's going to cross there. Whether you have a target deer or anything, you're going to get plenty of activity if they all use the same crossing in between those 4 fields. And I had him on camera from beans, and then the field that he actually crossed to come to me was wheat stubble from last year, and then the field on the other side of me was beans as well. So probably going beans to beans, and just caught him in that transition in between. And like I said, they hit 2 scrapes on the way by, so um, maybe they were just going to scent check scrapes. Maybe they were going to eat with that cold front coming in. I don't know, but uh, had them moving through that pinch.
Now, where do you hang your trail camera?
I had one on the, well, it would have been, I don't know, 80 yards west of me, overlooking that wheat stubble field, kind of on the plot watcher mode. And then I had another one on the creek crossing that ran next to that old rail bed, and that's actually what uh, pretty much all the mature deer used, was that old rail bed, um, because it had such steep ditches. They could use that, the rail bed sides as a travel corridor, and stay down out of sight, all the way to the creek bed. So uh, out of sight, out of mind, I guess. And pretty much every picture that I had of him consistently, especially daylight, was in those low spots where he couldn't be seen. And um, I had pictures of him 9:45 in the morning, 10:45 in the morning. I think I had 2 pictures of him at like noon or somewhere in there. So I knew he had to be bedded pretty close by. Uh, but even for him to be on his feet midday, it was just kind of still pretty uncommon. But with him being able to stay concealed, I think it made him more comfortable. And so that's just where I set up that set, was that crossing right there where he could stay down low.
How far was his bedding area from your set?
I'm gonna guess the field edge that I saw him come out on, which is kind of, it was a little further west southwest than what I had originally thought, where he might have been bedded in a pocket of timber. But I'm going to say it was 150 yards away, give or take. I saw him come out of the trees. He was probably just shy of 100 yards.
Hey, folks, we had a little technical difficulty, and so we're back with Jason Passmore, and we're talking about Gannon. Gannon's a monster early season buck taken in Kansas by Jason, and he's a monster. He's 245 gross, and so let's pick up where we were. Where was Gannon sleeping? Where was his bedding area?
Well, from best guess, when I first saw him, he was just shy of 100 yards west of me on that wheat stubble headed east to the crossing, and a little further south southwest or west southwest than what I actually had him pegged to be, bedded the thickest wood lot right there on that property. So he must have been, somewhat close in there. But it was close enough. I didn't want to push my luck and get any further in there, but yet I wanted to be close enough to their bedding area to where they could essentially make it to me before shooting light was over. So I tried to set up within inside 200 yards, I guess, is what I'm getting at, and it just worked out.
A couple of things you said earlier on that railroad bed, and basically uh, hid the buck, hid Gannon, and he felt really comfortable about walking because nobody could really see him. So, kind of explain how deep that was and why it was a favorable travel color
Uh, I would say it's probably 5 or 6 feet deep from the top of the railway, the old rail bed, down to the the main trails that run beside it. So, I mean, he was for sure out of sight, enough to make him feel comfortable anyway. And that's where I had a vast majority of the pictures, pretty much of all deer that I get in there, but especially mature deer that are avoiding being seen. And I think that played the biggest part of it was they could get down out of there, out of sight.
So you had a sense, definitely had a sense of security. Tell me about your access
Yeah.
because you said it's kind of a pinch, it's kind of a funnel. So you got a north wind blowing in. So where your stand is, you said the only way you could hunt it was on that north wind. So let's talk
Yeah, I
about
needed a west or a
accessing that.
northwest, and yeah, I actually, well, as the property sets up more north and south than anything, with the creek running from the southwest to the northeast, and then where I was set up, it hooks back and runs straight north and south right there, and I used on the east side of the railway, the old rail bed. There's I guess, a wet weather creek that only runs when we get a bunch of rain. And so I walked in from the east side of the field off the county road all the way into that old, the wet weather creek bed and got down in that where I was just as low as they were, but on the opposite side of the road bed, and followed that all the way to my tree stand down to the creek crossing where it dumps in to the creek right there. And then it was easy access from that point.
So if I'm thinking right, one you got a intermittent creek bed, seasonal creek bed. You got a railroad bed, and then you got a creek bed, all kind of intersecting the
Well,
same place.
kind of, yeah. They except for the side that they used wasn't it wasn't ever washed out, so it wasn't ever a creek because it stayed on the east side, and that's what I took in. So theirs was just basically a beat down trail. It would run some water if we got some real heavy runoff, but aside from that, it was just dry trails and stuff like that that connected all the fields together.
Okay, but you did walk in on a seasonal creek bed though, correct? I heard that
Yes,
right.
I did. That's correct. Yep. Yeah, you heard that right.
Okay, so folks, lessons learned. You know, don't take the easiest route, the most exposed route to your tree stand. Basically, stalk the tree stand. And one we all know, you only can hunt your tree stand, and I'm not talking a box blind or something like that over a food plot. I'm talking about, you know, where you expect the deer to come from and everything, and only hunt that, when the conditions are right. And you got to do that. You got to make yourself do that. I don't care what's happening. You got to do that, because if you do that, you're going to have success. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I waited for, was literally the perfect conditions. And even with the north wind, I was a little bit concerned, and I was pretty close to getting down when it started swirling, because it was blowing so hard. It was wrapping around the east side of the trees and pushing it west, and I was worried that I was going to get winded. But a couple of my buddies that I texted, they said, now's the time. If you're going to wing it, now's the time to do it, because hopefully you won't blow them out, or if you do, they'll be back, since it's so early in the season. So I decided to set it anyway. And once I got in there, on the close to my set, you could see that the wind was actually blowing down that railway. With that hard north wind, it would push my scent farther enough south with that north wind that I didn't think that I was going to be affected by it.
One thing that you said earlier, you kind of sort of had a feeling that come the rut, he was gone because there was not a lot of does in the area. And
Mm-hmm.
folks, that's part of why deer disappear later October, or you have the lockdown period, or whatever you want to call it. They just disappear because they go out and find the does, and it might not be on your 40, 80, 160, or whatever, and they're just gone because they got one thing in mind, and that's breeding. But Jason was hunting, Gannon's home turf, and he would come back there after the rut, but he might go 5 miles from that. Your thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah, the spot where my buddy found his shed was actually, I don't know, half to maybe a mile north of where I actually got a shot at him. And that's usually where he would travel to during the rut, because they hold so many more does. And we have a few resident does, but it's not a lot. So most of the mature bucks would venture out of our property onto the neighbors, and I figured that was the best time to get a shot at him, was while he was on a pattern, instead of just running around chasing.
Interesting. So let's take a break, and I'll ask this question. What you know today, what do you wish you knew, 5 years, 10 years ago, that would have made you a better hunter?
Uh, I didn't really start hunting the early season, and this is the first year I've killed in September. Let me rephrase that. First buck I've killed in September, by attempting to pattern, and the last two mature bucks that I've killed were in October. So before that, I was just like every other starting out whitetail hunter. I thought the only way to kill a big deer was during the rut, and it just, if you actually have one that you can get patterned and you can make a legitimate move on them, I think early season's the time to do it now. And I guess if there was one thing I could take away from that, that's what it would be.
Thanks for that, and I appreciate that. You got so many nuggets because one, uh, you're hunting, unpressured deer for the most part. Yeah, the neighbors are pushing them, maybe or maybe not. But when I think about your setup and how you did it, it's just a remarkable feat to take, once in a lifetime buck. And maybe you'll do it next year. I have no idea, but it's just simply, what a thrill, what an honor, what a privilege to be, one, to mix it up with a buck of that stature, and then two, to harvest them, says a lot about your abilities. So it's just, well done, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, it wasn't, it's hard to believe, but I wasn't nervous or anything. Even when I saw him closing the distance on that field, coming to me, it wasn't until after the shot when I lost it. And hung my bow up right away, sat down, took it in, after that, is as best I could, but, and then obviously backed out. But just, you know, fully appreciative of the opportunity to even be in that situation, and glad that I could hold it together up until that point.
Now, how far did he go?
80 yards.
So you double
So,
lunged him,
shot.
or tell me about the shot?
Yep. Well, when he first came out, I lost him when he came across the field, and then the other mature buck that was with him kept looking back. So I knew he was there somewhere, or at least I thought he was. And then, thank you. And I knew he was there somewhere. He took off trotting back to where Gannon was, and then all of a sudden I look over and Gannon's standing right there in the middle of the trail. He just walked out of some tall grass that is on that side of the rail bed, and he was actually at 15 yards at that point. But I didn't have any shooting lanes, didn't have a shot. So I had to wait for him to clear. And although I'm sure it wasn't very long, it seemed like forever. But he took a few steps. I don't know, maybe 15 yards north of where he had stepped out at, and stepped into an opening. I didn't have to stop him or anything. He stopped on his own, slightly quartering away. So I stuck it in a little bit further back on the ribs and went down through both lungs and out the front shoulder on the left side. And he jumped back in that tall grass, and headed back south. And instead of getting down and getting my arrow, I waited, I don't know, a few minutes in the stand. And then instead of going down and getting it at that point, I backed out, just because the wind was blowing so hard. I couldn't hear him crash, and everything this time of year is so overgrown. I couldn't see him if he went down. Went back to the truck, took my pack back, took my bow back, walked the long way around the edge of the property and glassed back out in the fields to see if he was laying out there or even standing out there. Couldn't see him. Called a couple of my buddies, called my wife, and we decided that thought it'd be a better plan to wait 2 hours. So we went in at a little after 8:45 and picked up blood. One of my buddies that's actually colorblind is the one that found the blood. The rest of us were struggling. I mean, just anxious to find him. And then once we slowed down and stayed on blood, took us right to him, 80 yards. I mean, he bled out both sides really well. 80 yards, and he'd been dead for a long time. He was already stiff when we got there. So 2 hours was probably extreme, but it wasn't a risk I was willing to take at that point.
Well done. And let's close the show. Gannon, how did he get that name?
That's the water system that he's on. There's a creek system in there that's the name of it, and I don't know why. I just called him that one time and it stuck. So that's what we called him, was Gannon.
So for the listeners, I know you got him green scored. So let's talk about what he had on his head.
A lot more than what we anticipated. Like I said, last year he was maybe 155, low 50s, maybe mid 50s. And then obviously this spring we knew he was going to be something special. And after velvet, he looked so big in velvet. After seeing him after he had shed his velvet, I thought there was a chance that he would break 200, but I didn't think that he would be much over that. And then there was obviously absolutely no ground shrinkage whatsoever. And a couple of guys that were there, they're like, I think he's going to go 220. Another guy, 225. And I was thinking, okay, yeah, maybe he'll go 215, 220. And then that night, my buddy Adam Rotler and another buddy Ryan White taped him out while we were standing around talking and just kind of goofing around. And they came up with 241, and I was like, no, that's not even close. And so I know another guy that's pretty efficient at scoring, and he put tape on him again and got 245 and 4/8. And I mean, we scored him 3 different times and got 245. So I think that's what he'll start out at. And
Amazing.
We'll just see after 60 days where he's at. And he was a mainframe 7x7 with 40, let's just call it 42 inches of extra. And then, but even at that rate, like I told you, he was only 11 inches difference from side to side, 11 inches in deductions. So he was 245 and then netted to 234.
Wow, I just, hopefully I can put my hands around his head sometime that I'm traveling through. But
sure.
Jason Passmore, thank you so much for the privilege of hearing your story here on Whitetail Rendezvous about Gannon, the monster buck from Kansas, and once in a lifetime. I mean, 99.9% of whitetail hunters in the world we'll never see a free range buck like that. So just, congratulations, sir. Enjoy it. And, as you grow older and the kids, grow older, and you'll sit back with your wife and you'll look back and just marvel at a trophy of that substance. So well done, sir.
Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate that. Like my wife and I said, we never thought that break the 200 mark, but I mean, it just shows you that, any deer can put it on. Not any deer, obviously. The genetics have to be there, and I just flat out got lucky that deer had it, but, it could happen. We never thought it would. I sure never thought I'd break the 200 mark, but just fortunate that right place at the right time.
With that, on behalf of hundreds of thousands of listeners across North America, Jason Passmore and the Gannon Bob, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.